As we wind down towards the home stretch of grass season, in other words, the third major of the year in Wimbledon, it's about time we bring things full circle, recap the happenings of grass season, and most importantly, dive into this draw. Now, off of first reaction, I've got to say that this is a much more balanced draw in my view than the Roland Garros draw, and mainly that's just a result of, the absences with Daniil Medvedev, Alexander Zverev, and things being, in my opinion, as they should be again, with Nadal and Djokovic being the top two seeds of this tournament. And as a result, in my opinion, all things point to Djokovic Nadal 60 happening in the final, which would be an absolute treat yet again. Will we get it? Well, we can only wait and see about that, but without further ado, let us just hop into this draw, starting with the Djokovic Quarter up top. As far as Novak is concerned, I think you can be happy with this draw, at least up to the quarterfinals. Not too many stumbling blocks there for Djokovic. As far as early rounds are concerned, he could possibly get Kokkinakis second round, then Kecmanovic third round. Both of those guys pretty talented, but I think both would also be outclassed by Novak, so doubt they'll really pose all that much of a threat. And then, looking down the road, I think the first real test Djokovic could get would be fourth round with potentially Basilashvili or Riley Opelka. Both those guys have the potential on grass, being hard hitters, and with Opelka being such a big server, arguably the biggest on tour right now. If those guys redline, they can certainly be a pain to deal with for anybody on a court like the grass at Wimbledon. That being said, I think if either guy makes it to that fourth round, I think the chances of either one of them redlining is a good bit below 50-50. So, surprise, surprise, your three-time defending champion, I think, is a bit of a shoo-in to make the quarterfinals. As for the other eighth of this quarter, you've got notable names such as Sinner, Wawrinka, Andy Murray, John Isner, Oscar Otta, Fabio Fognini, and Carlos Alcaraz. And let me just start with the latter in Carlos Alcaraz. Now, I hinted at it in one of my videos following Alcaraz's loss at the French Open, where I said that I think, on paper, Alcaraz should work on grass, given how big he hits the ball, how quick a mover he is, and just having a very well-rounded game. And, I still do feel that way, but that being said, I wouldn't be surprised if he's not acclimated to grass yet. It's such a small part of the season, and he's barely gotten time to really get acclimated. And perhaps something that I think more people should be wary of is his elbow injury that forced him out of all the grass tune-ups that he was slated to play. Considering he's able to play, that is a good sign, but, in his exhibition matches in Hurlingham, he had it heavily taped up, as he did when he won his first title in Umag. As we've known over the years, elbow injuries can be tough. It is that elbow, really, that has made me kind of raise my eyebrows at Alcaraz's results in these exhibitions, as he lost pretty convincingly to Francis Tiafoe and Casper Ruud in Hurlingham. I don't consider that a need to panic, Rafa, just about every year he's played Hurlingham over the past couple of years, has suffered some pretty uncharacteristic losses and gone on to do just fine at Wimbledon for the most part. But as we know, elbow injuries can be tough. I'm still cautiously optimistic for how Alcaraz will do here, but I think that is something to make note of. Now, straight off the bat for Carlos, he gets Jan-Lennard Struff, who, in 2019-2020, I think this would have been a real danger match to circle. Struff, given his game style, definitely can prove to be dangerous on a court like Wimbledon's. However, Jan-Lennard Struff on the year is 2-10, and I don't anticipate him just picking it up out of the blue in the midst of this just disastrous year for him. After that, I think Talon Griekspoor honestly could prove more challenging in the second round than Fabio Fognini. Fabio himself has been in a bit of a rut over the last couple years, to be honest. And then potentially you might get Oscar Otta in the third round, who played a really fun match with Andy Murray last year, who I think, also can be pretty competent on a grass court, at least on paper, given the way that he plays. However, I do think that these are all very manageable hurdles for Carlos Alcaraz. Nobody that you really sound the alarm bells for and say he's on upset alert for. Speaking of upset alert, someone that I do think we should watch out for is Jannik Sinner. And I say that in the sense that I do think Jannik is vulnerable at the moment. As it is, he is pretty unproven on grass, much like his peers. But in addition to that, Sinner has had such a rough stretch with injuries this season, has struggled to stay healthy when he has played. He's been incredibly consistent. However, just very recently we saw him, struggle with, I believe, a knee injury at Roland Garros against Andrei Rublev. Very unfortunate given, how the first set of that match went, but we've barely seen Sinner since he lost the one match that he played in Eastbourne. He's not comfortable on the grass as it is, and his, health is a question mark at the moment, so I do have him going out early here. It's an early, entertaining match with him and Wawrinka first round. Stan, really not the player that he once used to be, but I wouldn't put it past him to pull the upset there. At best, I do see Sinner losing to Andy Murray in a potential third round. I think that Andy is worth noting this grass court season. In Madrid, really, I thought Murray was playing the best tennis I think we'd seen from him in quite a bit, and I thought it'd be interesting to see if he could carry that over to the grass, and in his one stint in Stuttgart, that certainly was the case. He looked as good as he had in quite a bit and made it all the way to the final there, beating Tsitsipas and Kyrgios along the way. And then in the final played a very competitive match against Matteo Berrettini. Berrettini, obviously, no introduction needed to, his pedigree on this surface over the last couple of years. Unfortunately for Murray, in the third set of that final, he ended up dealing with an ab issue that really took the wind out of his sails and forced him pretty much out of the rest of grass court season. However, if that issue is really not something that's bothering him much, and if the body can cooperate, I think this is the best chance Andy Murray has had to make the second week of a major in quite a bit, and honestly, I do see that happening. Murray quietly is rebuilding his ranking and has played very well at stretches this year. As he demonstrated in that Stuttgart final, he really can be dangerous all the way up to the top of the game on this surface still. I got him making the second week, but I think that he will lose in the fourth round to Carlos Alcaraz. Gives us a quarterfinal of Djokovic Alcaraz out of the top quarter. How that match ends up going really is dependent upon, how well Alcaraz is able to adapt to the grass. Since it still is so early in his career and he might not be there the way he is on clay as well as hard courts, I'm going to roll with Djokovic. Moving on to the second quarter, that was really long. I did not anticipate spending that much time on our first quarter, but second quarter is the Casper Ruud Quarter, the 3 seed. Boy, that is really weird to see, but in spite of Ruud being the highest seed in this quarter, I definitely think that this is Hubie Hurkacz's quarter to lose. It really is a case of Hurkacz and the rest in this quarter. Hurkacz, obviously the reigning semi-finalist, and coming off the heels of a title in Halle, looks to be in very good form again, and is one of the few younger guys that is also very comfortable on the grass. Let's just start out with him. I think that his draw to the quarterfinals is pretty straightforward, to be honest. I think Cam Norrie is kind of cooled off after a hot start to the year. He would be the highest seed of someone Hurkacz could face before the quarterfinals. Don't really anticipate him making it there. I'm going to go out on the limb and say Dimitrov beats him in the third round. Grigor is putting together some of his most consistent tennis in a bit, really, ever since the back end of clay court season. He has demonstrated a good level in the past on grass. I would argue he's kind of underachieved on the surface, 2014 aside. If he can play up to his apex, of course, he could give Hurkacz quite a fight, but aside from that, don't really see too many obstacles for Hubie. Of course, opens out against Davidovich Fokina, a bit of a notable first round match again, but I don't anticipate him having too many issues getting through that. And again, I said if Dimitrov can play at his apex, he'd be a tough out for Hurkacz, for anyone really, but those days really rarely happen for Grigor, so I'm going to say Hurkacz to the quarterfinals, and I'm pretty confident in that. Moving into the bottom half, we have the Tsitsipas Quarter up third. Much like the quarter prior to this one with the Ruud Quarter, the favorite in this section is very clearly not the highest seed. That would be Matteo Berrettini in this case. Berrettini, of course, has been sidelined ever since Indian Wells with a hand injury, missed the entirety of clay court season. However, he has hit the ground running and not skipped a beat since he got back on court. Already mentioned that he took out the Stuttgart title, beating an inspired Andy Murray, and then followed it up defending his title in Queens. So yet again, Matteo Berrettini heads into Wimbledon among the topmost contenders for this title, and as far as his road, I really don't see anyone putting up that much resistance. I kind of have him as a shoe-in for the quarterfinals as well. You can just go down the list of the highest seeds and biggest names that he could face prior to the quarterfinals, and you see Brooksby, De Minaur, Schwartzman. You can name them all, but I really don't see any of them putting up much resistance stopping Berrettini. I think the best bet of the lot would be De Minaur, who could maybe give him a fight, won a title as recently as Eastbourne, if I remember correctly, last year. However, I really don't see any of those guys stopping Berrettini from cruising his way to the quarterfinals, and that is what I anticipate being the case. As far as who he could play, it is really interesting given this other eighth has a lot of big names and people that have had success on grass in the past. You've got Denis Shapovalov, who is the reigning semifinalist, however, has just been in disastrous form of late, and because of that, I probably see him as a first, second round out at best. Bautista Agut, who was fourth round last year, quarterfinalist the year before, and now coming off a very tightly contested Mallorca final. So obviously he's shown a level of comfort on the grass as well. Filip Krajinovic is coming off a final in Queens. Nick Kyrgios having his best season really in quite a long time and has shown some good flashes on the grass this year. And then lastly, Stefanos Tsitsipas coming off of his first ever title on grass in Mallorca. In spite of that, though, I do think that making the quarterfinals will be between Nick Kyrgios and Roberto Bautista Agut. RBA, not too many obstacles in his way to making the second week again. Might not even have to play Shapovalov on the way there. And then Nick Kyrgios, again, showed some good form throughout grass season this year. Semis in Stuttgart, I believe semis as well in Halle. lost a very tightly contested third set tiebreak to Hubie Hurkacz there. And yeah, Kyrgios, looking as motivated as he has in a while and as consistent as he has been in a while. A lot of that really, marked down to being in a better headspace, as well as, perhaps more importantly, being in as good a shape as he has been in some time. And as a result, I do think that this is really one of the best chances Nick has had to make the second week of a major in a very, very long time. Not going to pick him to make a quarterfinal for the first time since Australian Open 2015, of course, until I actually see it. But on the other hand, it is really something that I think is doable for Nick in beating an RBA to make the quarterfinals. That being said, though, I just can't bring myself to do it and pick him. And that will result in, I believe for the second straight year, me picking RBA to the quarterfinals. Much like the prior quarter, wily veteran with past success on the surface up against one of the guys among the top of the leaderboards in Matteo Berrettini in this case. And again, much of the same. I think in this case, Berrettini too much for RBA to overcome, which will see him find himself in the semifinals for a second consecutive year. And then we got this final quarter, the bottommost, the Rafael Nadal Quarter. And for Rafa, there are quite a few players that you could see as, obstacles as early as the second round, really. He could get Sam Querrey, a guy that's been a semifinalist here. I don't anticipate that being all that much of a challenge, but you always have to be wary of these big servers, especially early on in the tournament. Querrey, of course, his form is a good bit away from when he was making those deep runs here at Wimbledon. Honestly, I think Rafa's trip to the second week is relatively straightforward. I don't really see Popyrin or Sonego potentially down the line in the third round doing all that much against him. Albeit Popyrin did, push him a little bit at the French Open, no less, last year. But if all goes according to plan, I think Nadal should cruise his way into the second week, where I think he could potentially face his first real stern test in Marin Cilic. Now, Cilic coming off, a bit of a renaissance this season. Good results in Australia, as well as Roland Garros making the semifinals there for the first time. He is one that will be dangerous if he can get there. His pedigree on grass is very proven. He's made a final here before. But these are just projections as far as, worst case scenario for Nadal's draw. And quite honestly, I have a bit of a gut feeling that Marin Cilic is going to go out early. And it wouldn't be the first time, he's coming into Wimbledon kind of surging. I remember in 2018, I honestly thought he was about to go win the title after his win in Queens, and flopped from 2-0 up in the second round against Guido Pella. And, Cilic is just someone that's so streaky that you really never know. I kind of just get this gut feeling that I don't think that Cilic is going to be there waiting for Rafa in the fourth round. The stumbling blocks are certainly there for him. Mackie McDonald is not an easy first round in the slightest. He's a former fourth rounder here at Wimbledon. Gasquet obviously passed his best, but also someone who is comfortable on grass, and I wouldn't put it past him even now to pull that off. And then even Ruusuvuori as well as Van de Zandschulp, I wouldn't put it past them. Obviously, Cilic wins if he's on song, but I don't know, I kind of just got a feeling there. Regardless, if Nadal makes the second week, I really think he shouldn't have too many problems making it into the latter stages of the tournament at that point. As for who he could meet, for the second straight major, we could see him square off with Felix Auger-Aliassime in the quarterfinals. Felix, again, one of the rare few young guys that has proven to be quite comfortable on grass, and Considering that, I honestly think that Felix should have had a better grass court season than he ended up having. I thought he should have won Bosch, but obviously ended up losing to the Cinderella story of that week in Tim van Rijthoven. If I'm saying that correctly, apologies if I butchered that pronunciation, but obviously that happened, and then he ended up losing a tight match to Hubie Hurkacz, which is an acceptable result in the quarters of Halle. In spite of that, though, Felix, one of the reigning quarter finalists from last year, I feel like I can trust him to, make another reasonably deep run here at Wimbledon. He has quietly become quite consistent in these Grand Slams. He's made quarters of his last 4 majors now, going back to Wimbledon last year. And while he does have a tricky first round opener against Maxime Cressy, Felix has done a great job of late of, winning ugly in those early round matches that honestly used to be losses more often than not. And while it might not be pretty for those reasons, I still do think that he will make the second week. I think he's going to end up playing Taylor Fritz in the round of 16. Could be Holger Rune, but I'm going to roll with Taylor Fritz to make it there. He slowly seems to be getting back to what he was at the beginning of the year when he won Indian Wells, obviously made the 4th round in Australia. Of course, all that being derailed on account of some tough injury luck, picking up a foot injury, but he seems to be right back to where he was. Of course, picked up a second Eastbourne title today, beating Max Cressy in a very, very tightly contested final. His big game with the serve and forehand, I do think that'll be rewarded on these courts, and I think that'll be enough to get him to the 4th round. There, I think that Felix Auger-Aliassime will take him out. I anticipate a second straight quarterfinal for Felix here at Wimbledon. That, of course, means a second straight major quarterfinal between Rafa Nadal and Felix Auger-Aliassime. And just like their French Open clash, I have Nadal the victor again. Rafa should be relatively fresh, and if he makes it to this point, I do think that he will be sharp enough to make it into the final weekend. This, of course, will end up giving us a semi-final slate of Djokovic Hurkacz and Nadal Berrettini. Starting out with Djokovic Hurkacz, I do remember their match in 2019 being a really entertaining one. For 2 sets, it really was nip and tuck, and obviously Hubie has gotten quite a bit better since then. However, I don't really feel all that differently in the sense that I don't think that Hurkacz's peak level is about to match up with the Djokovic's and it be even footing. I certainly think that he can make it competitive again for a set or two like he did in 2019. But the type of player Hurkacz is, with big serve and, tendency to seek out the net, obviously that is a great blueprint to what you want out of a player on grass, especially the attacking the net part when you don't really see that all that much anymore. However, I just can't see that beating Djokovic 3 out of 5 on grass when he's become so difficult to beat on this surface. And, the margins for error aren't that great when you're playing that way. And it just gets amplified all that much more when you consider how much better Djokovic still is from the baseline than Hubie. So, I think that Hurkacz will get a set, but I got Djokovic going through to the final in 4. As for Nadal Berrettini, I kind of feel the same way, At this point, if he is still there, the grass will be more to Nadal's liking, with the court being more beat up as the tournament goes forward. And of course, if he would have made it here, he will have been playing at a high level. Plus, at its core, this matchup with Berrettini is just one that is so conducive to success for Nadal. Anytime there's any vulnerability on the backhand side for a righty, you just know that's going to be picked on regardless of the surface. And Matteo obviously has one that is blatant there with his backhand, and against someone of Nadal, Djokovic's caliber, you've seen it in his losses at slams. There's only so much you can compensate with, the sledgehammer of a forehand and serve that he possesses. But ultimately, there's no doubt Nadal is going to find his way into that backhand, and I really see something similar to what we have seen to his losses to Djokovic and Nadal in slams, where he gets a set and competes really well, but ultimately it's just too much to overcome. So this, of course, will give us a final between Nadal and Djokovic for the 60th time, and that honestly would just be so perfect. The spectacle would be unbelievable. And because it's these two players, we've got to talk about legacy stuff, of course. So I'm gonna size it up from this angle. As far as Novak is concerned, this really does feel like one of the most important majors for him to win since, I would say, 2014 Wimbledon, when there was all this scar tissue of him coming up short in slam finals. Hadn't won a slam in over a year. Similar kind of deal in Wimbledon 2018 when, he was coming in with probably his worst slump of his career, and again, had not won a slam in over a year. Confidence sort of teetering in both instances. And I say that again this year because I really think, all the pressure is going to be on Novak. It looks like his US Open participation is basically, window closing on that, and then Australia also up in the air next year, so you could see him not play a major for almost a year. And with Nadal having won the first two slams this year and put some distance between them again as far as slam tally is concerned, it really could be crucial at their age. The difference between going down one slam at the end of this tournament or it staying at two at least through the end of the year, maybe more by the year's end. And still, Djokovic gets on a roll. You have seen, records and deficits like that fall like they're nothing for him. But, it still feels very important, this tournament, for him. And for Nadal, calendar slam stuff won't really start being a conversation unless he wins this tournament. So from that standpoint, as far as intangibles and pressure is concerned, I do think that Novak is the one that's up against it here. As for Nadal, I honestly think that Wimbledon is an opportunity for him and will be as long as he can continue to play it, because, with his retooled game style ever since 2017 really, particularly 18 and 19, he's shown that he is a major player on grass again after a couple of struggles on the surface. And with grass, quite frankly, having easily the most limited field, obviously a lot of young guys not comfortable on the surface to this point, and now even more so with Federer out of the picture, at least as far as this year is concerned. This is a great opportunity for Nadal to reclaim Wimbledon glory for the first time in over a decade. And as far as matchup is concerned, obviously it is in Djokovic's favor. However, Wimbledon 2018 will attest to the fact that it is a whole lot closer than it is on hard court at this point in each of these guys' respective career. It's not nearly the uphill battle that Nadal looks at when he faces Djokovic on hard court these days. Because of all of this, I really do think that this match, if it were to happen, would be a real toss-up. I could go either way with it, and I kind of get the feeling that it would go 5. But ultimately, while I do think there are a couple of things going for Rafa in this potential match, I'm still going to roll with the boring answer of Djokovic. There is a part of me that is like, there's no way he's about to win 4 straight Wimbledons. But ultimately, this match will have to be won out on the court, and, Djokovic, the technical and matchup advantage he has. I'm picking Novak here to win in 5. I mentioned earlier also, the tipping point tournaments that Wimbledon 2018 and 2014 seemed like, where you could argue his career was teetering as, an all-time elite player. So it goes without saying, he's played under this type of pressure before and come through countless times. And tennis-wise, Djokovic's form is right there, as he showed throughout Rome and Roland Garros. Honestly think this could go either way, but gotta lean Novak's way. Definitely think it'll come down to Nadal Djokovic, but let's see what the next 2 weeks have in store for us. That'll do it for me. If you made it this far, thank you so much for watching. I appreciate it. I know this was a long one, as the draws typically are. I hope that you enjoyed. If you did, it would be much appreciated if you could give this video a like, help it perform better in YouTube's algorithm, and subscribe to the channel if you're not already. Thank you again so much for watching, and of course, I will see y'all in the next one.